The coffee in her thermos was already cold. Captain Mara Hale sat at the back of the briefing room in Building 47, posture perfect, expression unreadable. The air was stale, humming faintly with fluorescent lights. Outside, dawn pressed against the glass in a gray fog, the kind that made jet engines sound like ghosts tearing through cotton. "Supply chain updates remain unchanged for Q3, droned Colonel Barnes from the podium. Mara's pen moved, taking notes she had already memorized. Her uniform was crisp, her bun regulation tight. Nothing about her stood out. That was by design. Most people in the room saw her as the quiet one. Logistics officer, paper pusher. The woman in the corner who never raised her voice, never spoke unless spoken to. That was exactly how she liked it. "Captain Hale," Barnes called out suddenly. Her eyes lifted, calm. "You have the pilot rotation ready for the Ghost Hawk schedule?" "Yes, sir." "Good. That prototype flies next week. No mistakes." She nodded. "There will not be." But her fingers gripped the pen tighter. The Ghost Hawk. Classified project. Cutting-edge systems. A machine designed for battles she was no longer supposed to fight. She had read every spec sheet, studied every flight protocol, not because she had to, because she could not help herself. She kept her eyes on her notepad, but in her chest, something stirred. After the meeting, she returned to her desk. Cubicle D22. No windows, no attention. Just rows of files and schedules, and a terminal that blinked its dull green welcome. "Morning, Mara," chirped Janet Rodriguez, the bubbly admin from the next desk over. Mara replied with a polite nod. "Big day, huh? Everyone's buzzing about that Ghost Hawk flight." Mara offered a smile that barely reached her eyes. "Just another aircraft." But it was not, and they both knew it. Later that afternoon, a call came in. "Mara, this is Henderson from maintenance. The Ghost Hawk's test pilot's out with a stomach bug. We need a replacement for tomorrow's engine trial." Her pulse barely quickened. Her voice stayed flat. "I will find someone qualified." She hung up, stared at the roster. Names, ranks, flight hours. All technically capable, none ideal. Then her eyes lingered on the file's margin. Her name was still there. Flight status, active. Clearance, level 1. Combat hours, 2013. She had never requested deactivation. No one had ever noticed. Or maybe someone had made sure it stayed that way. She closed the file. But the silence in the room thickened. That evening she stood in Hangar C, just outside the restricted zone. The Ghost Hawk prototype loomed under halogen lights. Sleek, predatory. Its fuselage absorbed the light instead of reflecting it, like it belonged to another world. "Hell of a bird, ain't she?" said a voice behind her. Chief Master Sergeant Frank Morrison, maintenance lead, old school, sharp eyes. Mara nodded. "You ever fly something with that kind of neural interface?" he asked casually. "I manage scheduling." "That wasn't the question." Mara kept her gaze on the cockpit. "You carry yourself different," Morrison added. "Most paper pushers flinch when they walk into a hangar. You don't." Silence. He gestured toward the Ghost Hawk. "We're running short on pilots, Captain. Real short. This thing doesn't fly tomorrow. Command's gonna breathe fire." Mara turned to go. "If you ever wanted to stop hiding," Morrison said softly, "this would be the way back." She paused at the door. The hum of the hangar settled into her bones. Outside, jets screamed overhead in training runs. Her eyes closed for just a second. Muscle memory came back like a whisper. Throttle, roll, lock, fire. But then she opened them, and the quiet officer walked out of the hangar. At 0430 the next morning, alarms screamed across Whitmore Air Force Base. 12 unidentified aircraft. No transponders, jamming communications, Attack imminent. The Ghost Hawk sat fueled and armed, and there was no pilot. Mara stood at her desk, hands trembling, but not with fear. With the clarity that only came when the stakes were life and death. Someone knocked over a coffee mug down the hall. Papers scattered, radios crackled, emergency sirens howled. All around her, people moved, rushed, panicked, and Mara Hale stood still. Then she moved. One step, then another. Toward Hangar C. Toward the aircraft. Toward the identity she had buried 8 years ago. The call sign echoed in her ears. Vapor. It had been her name once, and today it would be again. The air inside Hangar C tasted like steel and fuel. Captain Mara Hale stood beneath the Ghost Hawk, its carbon-black fuselage still beaded with condensation. Around her, crew chiefs moved in a blur. Tools clanked, radios snapped. Someone cursed over a dropped hydraulic coupler. The entire base was surging toward readiness, except for one problem. They had no pilot. Not one cleared, trained, and within reach. Colonel Barnes arrived, red-faced and furious. "We have less than 10 minutes until those bogies reach weapons range." Chief Morrison gestured toward Mara. "Sir, she's got clearance." Barnes looked at her like she was a maintenance form that suddenly started breathing. "You?" he asked. "Captain Hale? Logistics?" Mara met his eyes, calm. "My record is current. My clearances are active. I am qualified to fly the Ghost Hawk." Barnes stared, as if trying to summon a different answer from her silence. Chief Morrison broke the tension. "Sir, we're out of time. That bird goes up, or this base burns." Barnes hesitated for one final second. Then he gave the nod. "You're cleared. God help us." The cockpit of the Ghost Hawk was colder than she remembered cockpits being. Mara slid into the seat. Her hands moved instinctively. Buckle, lock, switch, prime. The neural interface pulsed to life, recognizing her biopatterns. "Hello, pilot." The HUD greeted her like a ghost from another life. Her pulse slowed. Focus sharpened. Outside, the doors of Hangar C slid open with a scream of hydraulics. Wind roared inside. Alarms blared from the control tower. "Ghost Hawk 1, this is Tower. You are weapons free. Repeat, weapons free." "Copy," she said. Throttle engaged, brakes released. The prototype surged forward. She was airborne in 6 seconds. 20,000 feet above Whitmore, the world was silent. Clouds tore past the canopy like shredded cotton. The Ghost Hawk's engines whispered instead of howled. Stealth systems online, weapons locked, radar signatures minimal. Ahead, 12 red contacts marched across the screen. 3 formations of 4. Classic pincer. Perfect formation, but imperfect minds behind them. "Tower, this is Ghost Hawk 1. Visual on incoming contacts. Closing fast." "Copy, Ghost Hawk." "Godspeed." Her fingers hovered over the weapon selector. The cockpit was lit with soft blue glow, minimal noise, maximum intent. She angled toward the lead group. "Fox 2, she whispered. Missile away. Impact. Explosion. First enemy down before they even knew she was there. The formation broke. She was in it now. Not a logistics officer, not a relic, not a ghost. She was vapor. At the command center, Barnes stood frozen. "Who the hell is flying that thing?" asked Major Whitman, eyes wide as she watched the radar feeds update. "Captain Hale," Barnes said, voice barely audible. "Apparently she's not who we thought." They watched the screen as the Ghost Hawk tore through the enemy lead group like a scalpel through silk. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered. Back in the sky, Mara danced with death. 2 enemy fighters locked on. She banked hard, dove low. The Ghost Hawk followed every thought like it was breath. The neural interface made her feel less like she was flying, more like she had become the machine. A sharp tone blared. Missile lock. She cut power, rolled, deployed countermeasures. The enemy weapon sailed past. Then she climbed, hard, straight up through the clouds, sun catching her canopy. She looped over and dropped like a hammer. 2 cannon bursts later, both fighters were falling in flames. "Splash 3, she said quietly. The final group tried to retreat. Too late. Falcon Squadron was already closing in. Captain Derek Mason's voice crackled through the comms. "Ghost Hawk 1, you're not going to leave any for us, are you?" Mara smiled, just slightly. "Get in line, Falcon Leader. I'm only warming up." Together, they finished the last attackers in tight formation. On the ground, the base erupted in cheers as the final radar contact disappeared. 12 enemy aircraft, 0 Allied losses. It should have been impossible. It nearly was. 20 minutes later, the Ghost Hawk touched down on runway 27. Mara taxied toward the hangar, canopy lifting as emergency crews ran to meet her. No one spoke at first, not until Colonel Barnes pushed through the crowd, staring at her like she had grown wings. "What's your call sign, Captain?" he asked, breathless. She looked at him, at the dozens of stunned faces, at the base she had just saved. "Vapor," she said. Silence. Then Morrison spoke, voice reverent. "She's the pilot from Kandahar, the one who vanished." Mara climbed down from the aircraft, boots hitting the tarmac. She stood straight, steady, silent, but not invisible anymore. The base had never been so loud. Applause echoed down the hangar corridors. Voices buzzed across radio frequencies. Pilots clapped each other on the back. Someone even whistled when Mara stepped onto the tarmac. She kept walking, straight-backed, focused. Her boots hit concrete in measured cadence, but her mind was far ahead, already bracing for the fallout. Colonel Barnes trailed behind her. "Captain Hale, I will report for debriefing immediately, sir." He nodded, trying to catch up to the moment. Everyone was. Inside Building 17, the command staff had gathered. Screens still flickered with radar footage. Red blips, yellow arcs, confirmed kills. 5 downed enemy aircraft, Major Whitman said, scrolling through the digital after-action report. 3 by direct missile strike, 2 by cannon. "And all in a platform she's never flown before," muttered a flight operations officer. "No sim time, no test prep. She just got in and flew." Barnes looked at the report, then back at Mara. "How?" She met his eyes. "That aircraft was built for people like me." No arrogance, no pride, just truth. The hallway outside the briefing room was dim, lined with faded photographs of past commanders. Mara stood alone beneath one of the frames, eyes locked on the floor. "You're not even winded," said a voice beside her. Janet, still in her admin uniform, still holding 2 coffees. "Everyone's freaking out," Janet added. "You just saved an entire airbase and now you're standing here like it was a grocery run." "I did what needed to be done," Mara replied. "You flew like you'd never stopped." Silence. Janet pressed one of the coffees into her hand. "You ever going to tell me the whole story?" she asked. "I do not think you want the truth." "I think I want exactly that." Mara looked down the hallway, where officers whispered behind glass doors, where files were being pulled, where the bureaucracy had already begun sharpening its teeth. 8 years ago, she said finally, someone decided the safest place for me was in a cubicle. And you agreed? I was tired. I let them file me away like a broken weapon. But you're not broken, Janet said. I am now something they do not know what to do with. By noon, a Pentagon security officer arrived. By 2, General Harrison had landed at the base. By 3, Mara was sitting in a debriefing room with classified documents stacked like bricks around her. General Harrison entered last, tall, Command presence. Vietnam-born discipline in a digital age uniform. He said nothing at first, just stood across from her watching. Then, Captain Hale, or should I say, Vapor. She did not answer. I've read your sealed file. Desert Storm, Kandahar, Bosnia, Kosovo. 37 confirmed air-to-air kills. Decorated, classified, disappeared. Still, she said nothing. I need to know what happened. Why you vanished into logistics. Who made that decision? Mara's voice was low. You already know the answer. He did. They both did. Political fallout. Misjudged call in a gray zone engagement. A scapegoat in need. She was too skilled to be discharged and too dangerous to keep visible. So they buried her. You had every reason to walk away, he said, but you did not. I made a choice today, she said. That does not mean I am ready to make another. Harrison leaned forward. You saved this base, Captain. You broke formation, shattered protocol, and flew the most dangerous mission we've seen in 2 decades. I want you back in the cockpit, permanently. I never left it. I just stopped being seen in one. He studied her. Then it is time you were seen again. By sunset, the hangar was nearly empty. The Ghost Hawk sat under tarps, silent again. A sleeping predator behind caution tape. Mara stood at the edge of the hangar alone, staring at it. You going to fly again? Morrison asked, appearing beside her. I already did. Not what I meant. She hesitated. Then, they will not let this go quietly. They never do. Flying was the easy part. And living with it? That is harder. Morrison nodded. You're not the only one who got shelved, Captain. But you're the first one I've seen walk back into the fire without flinching. I flinched, she said softly. He looked at her. But I flew anyway. That night, in her quarters, Mara unlocked the footlocker beneath her bed. Inside were remnants of another life. Dog tags from fallen squad mates. A patch from her old unit. A photograph, her and her wingman, both grinning under desert sun. He had not made it home. She traced the edge of the photo. Then, slowly, she removed her logistics uniform and folded it with quiet precision. It would not be needed tomorrow. The room was colder than it needed to be. Concrete floor. Windowless walls. Metal table bolted to the center. 2 chairs, both unwelcoming. 1 overhead light. Interrogation theater, dressed up as protocol. Captain Mara Hale sat with her hands folded neatly on the table, back straight, expression calm. Across from her sat Brigadier General Amanda Cross, the kind of officer who had never flown a combat mission, but had flown through 5 promotions in 6 years. Her ribbons glittered. Her clipboard did not tremble. Let me be clear, Captain, she said. This is not a performance review. It is an investigation. Mara said nothing. You operated a prototype aircraft without prior authorization. Mara remained still. You violated chain of command, commandeered military hardware, and engaged in combat without formal orders. Still, silence. Cross's tone sharpened. Do you deny any of these actions? Mara raised her eyes. Calm. Even. Still. No, ma'am. Then help me understand why. Mara's voice was flat, but not lifeless. Because 12 enemy aircraft were inbound, because there were no qualified pilots, because I had 8 minutes, and because this base was going to burn. Cross's pen paused above the paper. You believe that justifies unauthorized combat engagement? I believe breathing justifies air. Outside the room, General Harrison watched through the one-way glass. He stood with Major Whitman, arms crossed, face unreadable. She's holding the line, Whitman said quietly. She always did, Harrison replied. She's not even angry. She is beyond anger. That's what makes her dangerous. Back in the room, Cross shifted tactics. Your file, she said, tapping the thick folder beside her. Disappeared from flight rosters in 2017. Transferred without recommendation. Buried in logistics. Why? Ask the people who buried it. Do you believe you were treated unfairly? Mara's jaw tightened. I believe I was told to sit down and be quiet. And you agreed? For 8 years. Cross leaned forward, lowering her voice. Then why now? Mara stared past her, past the room, past the years. Because I heard jets coming, and no one else was standing up. Later that day, Mara sat outside the command building. The sun had dropped below the hangar roofs, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The air smelled like scorched fuel and dying adrenaline. Janet approached, holding 2 water bottles this time. I heard about the Inquisition, she said, offering one. Mara took it without comment. She tried to make you regret it, didn't she? She tried to make me disappear again. Janet sat beside her, staring at the concrete. They can't unsee what you did. No, Mara said softly, but they will try to rewrite it. That night, Mara walked the perimeter of the airfield. Old habit. The silence out there was different than inside. Cleaner somehow. Crickets. Wind. The faint buzz of high-voltage lights. She paused beside the Ghost Hawk. The tarp had been removed. The aircraft glistened under security floodlights like it was waiting for her. A younger airman stood watch nearby. Nervous. Probably just out of tech school. Is it true? He asked. You flew her solo? Mara did not answer. I read about pilots like you in flight school, he added. But I thought they were all... He stopped, unsure how to finish. Gone? Mara offered. He nodded. Most are, she said. Some just forgot they were still alive. She looked back at the aircraft, then to the sky. Still infinite. Still calling. By morning, Mara's name was everywhere it should not have been. She saw it first on a digital bulletin from Air Force Public Affairs. Unidentified pilot averts airbase catastrophe using prototype aircraft. The words were sterile, careful. But in every whisper, every hallway glance, the name behind the story was already known. Vapor. The call sign moved faster than the official reports. It was in the pilot lounges, in the chow hall. Between bites of powdered eggs and sips of burnt coffee, someone always said it, softly, like speaking it too loud might summon her. She flew 5 sorties in one engagement. Did you hear what she pulled during Kandahar? They said she was buried after Pristina. They said she never came back. But she had. And she could feel the weight of it pressing against her ribs. Janet found her outside Building 47, standing where she used to enter every day for the past 8 years without being seen. You can't go back in there, Janet said. I know. They've reassigned your office, flight operations, 5th floor. Mara looked up at the building. It felt smaller now, as if her absence had shrunk it. They'll never treat you the same again, Janet added. I don't expect them to. Janet hesitated. Do you miss it? Being anonymous? Mara didn't answer right away. I miss the silence, she said at last. At 1400 hours, Mara reported to the command center for a classified briefing. General Harrison was already waiting, flanked by Major Whitman and a civilian intelligence liaison. Sharp suit, no rank, no name. On the screen behind them, still frames from the engagement. Radar trails, infrared footage, 12 enemy aircraft burned into the record. Harrison nodded toward her. Sit. She did. The civilian stepped forward. The attacking aircraft were outfitted with advanced avionics and tactical jamming systems, not something you buy off the shelf. Whoever sent them had money, training, and access. State actor? Mara asked. Possibly, the civilian replied. But there's another theory. A pause. Private sector, Whitman said, answering the silence. A military contractor. Someone who wanted to test the Ghost Hawk. Or destroy it. Mara's gaze narrowed. Sabotage. Or field testing under fire, Harrison added. Either way, you were not the target. The Ghost Hawk was. And that explained everything. The coordinated attack, the silence on the comms, the precision that mirrored their own tactics. What do you want me to do? Mara asked. You're the only pilot with real combat data in that platform, Harrison said. We're transferring the Ghost Hawk program to Edwards. Full operational testing. You'll command it. Mara's jaw tightened. I wasn't asking, Harrison said. Later, alone in the barracks, Mara sat on the edge of her bunk. The duffel was packed, her old flight suit folded on top. The name stitched above the patch had never changed. Hale, not Vapor, not yet. There was a knock at the door. It was Morrison. He held something in his hands. A flight patch, her original squadron insignia, sun-bleached, scarred. They found this in storage, he said. Figured it belonged to you. She took it without a word. Lot of people looking up to you now, he added. Pilots, techs, kids who never thought ghosts were real. I'm not what they think. Doesn't matter. You're what they need. He left without waiting for a response. She sat there for a long time, holding the patch, and for the first time in 8 years, she allowed herself to miss them. Her old unit. The ones who never came back. The ones who would never hear the name Vapor again, except in stories passed from hangars to airfields, whispered between rotations. A name once buried, now too loud to silence. The desert wind at Edwards was sharper, drier, carried fewer voices, but more history. Every pilot knew what this place was, the crucible, where aircraft were pushed beyond design, where reputations were made or unmade, where ghosts either flew or vanished. Captain Mara Hale arrived at 0630, flight suit pressed, face unreadable. She passed under the same sign all test pilots walked beneath. Flight Test Center, first to the future. A young lieutenant waited just inside the security gate. Ma'am, sorry, Captain Hale? He stumbled over the rank, over the reality of her presence. Yes. Lieutenant Lisa Chun, I'm assigned to your test team. Welcome to Edwards. Mara offered a nod. Nothing more. They walked toward Hangar 6 together. Concrete sprawled in every direction, but the sky felt closer here, more immediate. Everyone's talking about Whitmore, Chun said, nervous. You flew 5 confirmed kills in a prototype aircraft with no sim time. I flew because there was no one else. You flew because you're Vapor, Chun corrected. That's what they say. Mara didn't respond. Inside Hangar 6, the new production model of the Ghost Hawk sat on polished titanium ramps. It looked the same, but it wasn't. This one was smarter, quieter, faster, waiting. A man in civilian clothing stood by the wing, arms folded. Early 50s. Engineer by posture, cynic by tone. You're the legend, he said as Mara approached. Let's hope you still fly better than your personnel file suggests. Name? She asked. Dr. Alan Kessler, lead systems engineer. I designed the neural interface. I also fought to keep the test program small, before command decided to hand it over to someone who hadn't flown in nearly a decade. Mara studied him. You object to my assignment? I object to mythology replacing process. Mara stepped forward until they stood eye to eye. Then test me, she said. He blinked, a flicker of discomfort, then a nod. Fine. First sim runs at 0900. We'll see what your legend is built on. In the simulator bay, Mara strapped in without help, Kessler watched through the glass, arms crossed. Two junior engineers took notes beside him. One leaned over. Should we dial it back for her first flight? Kessler didn't blink. No. Inside the cockpit, Mara settled her breathing. The sim powered up. The neural interface synced immediately. No lag, no confusion. The HUD blinked. Welcome, pilot. Ready for mission. She ran the gauntlet. Combat scenario. Multiple vectors. Jamming active. Altitude shifts. Target prioritization. She didn't just survive. She scored a 97. The room behind the glass fell silent. After the session, Kessler approached, slower this time. You still remember? I never forgot. He gave her a long look, then offered a folder. Next sim, night strike, variable weather, 4 waves. No friendly support. Mara took it. I'll see you at 1400. That afternoon, word spread through Edwards like wildfire. She wasn't a myth. She was better. Pilots began watching her sim runs. Engineers adjusted their attitudes. Even the skeptical base commander showed up unannounced to observe. By day's end, the flight line buzzed with a quiet energy, respect, still restrained by rank and regulation, but growing. She hadn't asked for it, but it had started. That evening, alone in her new quarters, Mara opened her laptop. One unread message. From General Harrison. Subject, progress. Text, are you ready to stop surviving and start leading? She stared at the message, typed 3 words, then erased them. Typed again. Reply, not yet. But I'm closer. She hit send. Outside her window, the desert night spread wide, silent, endless, full of sky. They called it a review board, but it looked like a trial. 3 generals seated behind a long table, flags flanking the wall. A camera red-lit in the corner. No jury, no applause, just judgment disguised as structure. Captain Mara Hale stood at attention in her flight suit. Her ribbons, long unworn, looked too bright under the overhead fluorescence. General Amanda Cross sat in the center. She had not forgotten Whitmore, and she had not forgiven it. We are convened to determine whether Captain Hale's recent actions, while effective, represent an operational liability to this branch of service, Cross said crisply. Harrison sat to the right, face still, not silent, but waiting. Mara spoke first. Before we begin, may I ask a question? Cross blinked, irritated. This is not a forum for... Was anyone else going to fly the Ghost Hawk that day? Silence. Cross tried again. This board is not reviewing the outcome. Mara stepped forward. Then what is it reviewing, General? My qualifications? My judgment? My ability to fly? Cross stiffened. Your ability to follow orders. Your willingness to remain within the framework of established command. I did not violate my oath, Mara said. I fulfilled it. From the back of the room, Morrison watched with arms folded. Beside him, Janet whispered, They're trying to box her in. She doesn't fit in boxes, Morrison muttered. That's why they buried her. Back at the front, Cross turned to her papers. Captain Hale, your disappearance from operational duty in 2017 coincides with the Pristina incident. Mara did not move. You were reassigned to logistics. Your file was sealed. Can you explain why? Yes. Well? I was politically inconvenient, she said. There were consequences to admitting that we intercepted foreign aircraft in restricted airspace. My decision followed the rules, but someone needed to be blamed. You're suggesting you were scapegoated. I'm not suggesting anything, Mara replied. I was there. You weren't. A beat of silence followed. Then General Harrison cleared his throat. Captain Hale, he said, in the past 3 weeks, You've requalified on 3 aircraft platforms, completed over 200 simulated engagements, and rewritten the Ghost Hawk test protocol. Your flight evaluations are the highest we've recorded in a decade." He paused. "But this hearing isn't about performance. It's about trust." Mara nodded. "I know what it means to lose that." She let the words hang, let them ache. 8 years ago, I stopped fighting. Not because I was wrong, but because I was tired of explaining myself, of arguing with people who only knew war from policy briefs. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that staying visible would cost me everything. So I chose silence." Cross leaned forward. "And now?" "I've learned that silence is not the same as peace." The board recessed. Outside, the hallway was warm. Sunlight spilled across the tile, painting her boots in gold. Janet waited. "Well?" "They didn't throw anything," Mara said dryly. "That's progress." "You think they'll reinstate me formally?" "I think they already have. They just haven't admitted it yet." An hour later, the verdict came through. Captain Mara Hale is hereby restored to full operational status. Effective immediately. Assigned, Lead Pilot, Ghost Hawk Experimental Program. Call sign, Vapor. No applause, no celebration, just an email. That was how the military said sorry. That evening, Mara stood alone on the hangar floor, watching tech crews perform final checks on the Ghost Hawk's next-generation airframe. Lieutenant Chun approached quietly. "I heard the news," she said. "You're official again." Mara nodded. "You earned it," Chun added. "No," Mara said softly. "I reclaimed it." She looked at the aircraft, sleek, quiet, deadly, just like her. "I'm not flying to prove anything anymore," she said. Chun tilted her head. "Then why?" Mara stepped toward the ladder. "To make sure no one else ever has to be erased the way I was." And with that, she climbed back into the sky. 6 months later, the Mojave sky was alive with movement. 2 Ghost Hawks streaked overhead, training in tandem. Thin contrails laced the sky like white scars against blue silence. On the ground, Captain Mara Hale, no, Major Mara Hale now, stood at the edge of the runway, headset on, posture still. She was not flying today. That was the difference. Leadership meant staying on the ground when every instinct begged to fly. "Ghost Hawk 2, Titan formation, you're drifting." The voice in her headset responded instantly. "Lieutenant Chun." "Copy, adjusting 2 degrees." Mara tracked the formation on her tablet. Wind shear, altitude, target separation. Her mind absorbed it all without effort. The neural instincts had not dulled. She simply wielded them differently now, from command. Inside the operations building, a wall of screens showed real-time data from the test flight. Flight engineers murmured over telemetry. Maintenance officers took notes. Janet stood beside a corkboard, pinning updates to training schedules. "Hard to believe," she said, glancing at the monitors. "This place used to run on caution tape and duct-taped laptops." Mara sipped her black coffee. No sugar, no change. "Progress is quiet," she said. Janet smiled. "So is redemption." By noon, the Ghost Hawks landed. Chun climbed down first, grinning under her helmet. "Clean pass, system solid." Mara approached. "You're ready for live drills." "Think I'll ever fly like you did at Whitmore?" Mara's expression softened. "I hope not," she said. Chun raised a brow. "Because if you are," Mara added, "something's gone very wrong." That night, Mara sat alone in her quarters. She pulled the flight log from a drawer. Not digital, paper, the old way. Page by page, she had begun rewriting her history, not erasing the past, but reshaping how it lived in her memory. At the back of the book, tucked between worn pages, was a folded photo. Her old squadron, pre-Kosovo, pre-scandal, pre-ghost. She unfolded it. Time had blurred the faces, but the names were still sharp in her mind. She did not cry. She never had. But she allowed herself to sit with them for a while. Not as Vapor, not as Major Hale, just as Mara, the one who'd survived them all. The next morning brought another letter. Classified courier, black envelope, gold trim, U.S. Air Force Special Projects Command, to Major Mara Hale, next assignment. Her eyes scanned the contents. A new aircraft, stealth bomber, hypersonic, unnamed, top secret, high risk, uncharted territory. At the bottom, a handwritten note. If it flies, we figured you'd want to know first. Harrison. Mara closed the folder and stared out the window. The sky was quiet. For now. But she knew better than most. Quiet was never permanent. It only meant someone like her was being called again. That afternoon, she returned to the hangar. The Ghost Hawk sat gleaming beneath the high windows, sunlight bleeding across its skin. Morrison stood beside it, wiping down a wing. Next ride? He asked. Maybe. He tossed her a coin. Custom unit challenge coin. One side, the Ghost Hawk insignia. The other, the name Vapor, etched in matte black. We made a few of those, he said. Figured the legend deserved something solid. She caught it, turned it in her hand, then slipped it into her pocket without a word. Before leaving the hangar, she paused at the threshold. Pilots came and went. Engines whined in the distance. Radios crackled with frequency codes and weather updates. None of them stared anymore. She had been reabsorbed into the rhythm, seen but not sensationalized, trusted, earned. She stepped into the sunlight, gazed toward the sky. That sky was never hers to keep, but it was always hers to answer. And when the world called again, she would rise, not because she had something to prove, but because that was who she was. A ghost no longer. A name no longer whispered. A warrior returned. A legacy in motion.